Welcome back. Yesterday was running backs 1 through 6. Today we're continuing that with 7 through 12. At this point, you're likely going to see some of the names you're real familiar with seeing much higher up on a list. But let's jump right into it. My RB7 for this coming year is Ezekiel Elliott. And I think that RB7 is a really nice spot for Zeke, in my opinion. And it's the start of a grouping in the rankings, a tier that includes more of the big names, like I said, you didn't see last video. He really underperformed this year, and trust me, I faced it firsthand. I believe in week 4 or 3, I traded Dalvin Cook and Devontae Parker for Zeke and Kenny Golladay. I was about 2 weeks before Dak died on the field, and 3 weeks before Kenny Golladay died on the field. Terrible trade, had a rough year. Besides that, he still finished as the RB11, which isn't great for a guy who was coming off the board at the RB2, RB3. But he had half of an offensive line. I think La'el Collins, Tyron Smith, and Zach Martin were all out for the year at various points, and he was playing with Ben DiNucci and Garrett Gilbert at points throughout the year. Finishing RB11 with almost 11 weeks of Andy Dalton, Garrett Gilbert, Ben DiNucci, and no offensive line is a fucking accomplishment in of itself. I'm proud of him for doing that. But in those first 4 weeks with Dak, the full weeks with Dak, I'm not going to count the half of week 5, he was the RB4 and was the RB6 with 19.2 points per game. With Dak and a relatively healthy O-line, Zeke saw a career-high 7.5 targets per game with 5.75 receptions. That's a pretty good step considering a lot of people considered him on-the-ground type of workhorse, wouldn't get the receiving volume, kind of how people view Derrick Henry. But this year, that narrative is starting to be turned on its head. He was really getting involved in the passing game a bit, but that got cut short. Once Dak got injured, the entire offense pretty much fell apart relatively quickly, not to mention he was banged up towards the middle and end of last year. That's why people think Tony Pollard's better than him. He's not. There's a reason Tony Pollard's a backup. Not going to get into it. But when you look at a lot of the advanced stats, like juke rate, evaded tackles, yards created per touch, they're basically identical to last year, where he was the RB4, I believe, on the year. The main difference, besides Dak not having the foot after week 5, was that his run blocking efficiency last year was 13th. This year it was 51st. The only difference between 2019 Zeke and 2020 Zeke was an extra year to his age and the surrounding situation that fell off a cliff. More or less, Zeke is the same exact player he was. Sure, there's a little more tread on the tires, a little more wear and tear that comes with age, but for the most part, he is pretty much the same player. The main issue, like I said, was the O-line and Dak getting hurt. Dak's going to be back. They're going to sign him to an extension. Even though he wants Patrick Mahomes money, I think he will get extended. Franchise tagging him was just a really bad spot for them in 2022. There's a very good chance that your league mates are going to have about 7 to 8 players above Zeke at the running back spot. Maybe everyone I've mentioned before him switch out an Eckler for a Kamara, throw in a Saquon Barclay. Then you're looking at Zeke as the RB9, RB10 possibly off your board. And that's an absolute steal considering I have him ranked as the RB7. If you can get this guy, depending on league size, in the early mid-second round with a guy like Nick Chubb as the RB1, you're going to fucking eat next year. At my RB8, we have another familiar name, another veteran of the game, Saquon Barkley. When healthy, you can't deny the talent, you can't deny the production. He's one of the best running backs in the league whenever he's on the field. We can't forget that his rookie year, he was the RB2 in fantasy with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 15 touchdowns. I believe he was one of 6 running backs to do that, be a rookie with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage over the past 20 or 30 years or something like that. An utterly ridiculous stat. Dude balled the fuck out as a rookie. We all know how good he is when he's fully healthy. And if he was fully healthy, he would be a hell of a lot higher than 8. He'd probably be in that 2 to 4 range. But that's the major if. Saquon's injury is one that I feel like people are slightly underestimating it. I'm going to preface this description by saying I gather most of the information around the injury from BDGE and I believe by extension Jesse Morris. I know they kind of work together. Saquon's injury wasn't just a typical ACL tear. It was ACL, MCL, and torn meniscus. Now, a normal ACL tear requires around 9 to 12 months of rehab, so if that was just it, that was the only thing Saquon got hurt, he would be back by around week 2, week 3 of next year, giving him that full 12 months of recovery, getting back to full strength, full confidence. And honestly, given how modern medicine's progressing, I wouldn't be shocked if he was back for the preseason next year. Besides, he's also a fucking cyborg. But he also tore that MCL and meniscus, which is already a longer recovery time. That's more from 12 to 15 months, I believe. Maybe closer to 12. And they had to wait a month for the swelling in his knee to go down due to the torn meniscus, which would push a 1-year recovery time already to week 6 of next year. So already we've shifted the table from week 2 to week 6. We're basically halfway into the fantasy season right now, and Saquon Barkley still is just getting back to 100%. So he might not be physically ready until about a month in. And sure, he'll come back maybe even optimistically week 4 of next year. He'll be fully healthy, fully physically ready. The issue is less that physical component as much as it is that mental component. Saquon runs strong, he runs hard, he runs instinctually, his legs just take him places that no one else could dream of going. And if you're coming off such a catastrophic injury and one of your legs and you're someone who really depends on that instinct to get from point A to point B, take a few detours along the way, I don't know if we're going to see that jump cutness, that explosiveness, that vision, that breakaway speed as much as we've seen in the past. 2022 is a different story. He's going to be a value. If he underperforms this year, he'll be much higher on my rankings, given that guys 2 years out from ACL tears, that second year when they come back, are usually closer, if not completely full strength, if not a little higher even. Some guys tear that shit up and then come back stronger. The last player to storm back the next year from an ACL tear was Adrian Peterson, who tore his ACL and MCL as well. Now, Saquon is ridiculous. He's an absolute physical specimen, so it wouldn't shock me if he was the guy that could come back from such a destructive injury week 1 and absolutely lay everybody out. But this is a situation that's going to closely require a lot of careful monitoring and dissection of what's coming out. And at this point, I'm not confident enough that he's going to be 100% ready to go both physically and mentally for the start of next season, even halfway through to half many higher than 8. He's here out of respect. He's here because the talent's there and what we all know he can do on the field. The injury just makes it a lot harder to put him above any of these other guys. My RB9, he's finally making the appearance, Alvin Kamara. He's at 9. I can't justify putting him any lower. I considered willing bumping him to 10, but the guy I have at 10, kind of disrespectful to have above Alvin Kamara. So his floor is at 9. I know this is absolute blasphemy, but I want to preface this by saying that I am making the assumption that Drew Brees is retiring, because that's pretty much what's been all but confirmed. I know the workout video threw a spanner in that work, but we've considered that Drew Brees is retiring and that Taysom Hill is likely to be the Saints quarterback. Why not Winston? Because the Saints just paid Jameis Winston under $1 million, and he is likely going to want a lot more than that. I can't say for certain. And I know the Saints are cap wizards who somehow turned $100 million over the cap into like 12. But there's a lot of quarterback openings this year, and Jameis Winston, if he so chooses, which I believe he will get paid a hell of a lot more than under $1 million. Probably 10 to 15 times that on a more expensive prove-it deal somewhere else. I just don't know if the Saints are going to be able to re-sign him when they're already taking a massive cap hit for a quarter tight end running back in Taysom Hill. So I think Taysom Hill is the guy they roll out there. Obviously, things change if the situation changes. If Drew Brees comes back, he gets bumped up, probably to RB3, maybe RB2 in that range, 2 to 4. If it's Winston, I'll probably bump him back up to 4 to 5. If it's Hill, I'm keeping him here at RB9. But getting into his actual production outside of that external situation that's out of his hands, he was the RB1 overall this past year, and he's been a top 5 running back 4 out of the past 5 years, with 2019 having him finish as the RB12 due to lingering knee and foot injuries. I believe he partially tore something. At some point, dude's a fucking beast for playing through it and still being an RB1. When he's healthy, we absolutely know what he can do, and I'm not going to doubt his health moving forward given his consistency, his production, and how those injuries really didn't seem to stop him at all this year. He put up 1,700 yards from scrimmage with 21 total touchdowns and a fat 22.4 points per game. He's an absolute killer with a proven track record with Drew Brees, and this is the ugliest part of Kamara's profile for next year. When Brees went down and we had those 4 games with Taysom Hill, it got really, really ugly. His points per game and half-ppr dropped from 25.91 with Brees to 12, basically 13 with Taysom Hill. His points got chopped in half. His reception averages dropped from 6.6 to 2.5 with 0 receiving touchdowns. His targets dropped from 8.3 to 4, and his receiving yard averages fell from 64 to 13. This is a guy who, while he is an incredible runner, gives you most of that production through the air. Without that production, his points per game literally got halved. That's an insane decrease, an insane drop-off that we can't ignore. His rushing attempts, however, stayed the same, as did yards, and his rushing touchdown average over the whole season dropped from 19 with Brees to 12 with Hill. A lot of this is due to the fact that in certain situations, Taysom Hill can just run it in himself. Why pass the ball to Kamara, Michael Thomas, or even hand it to Kamara when you can just do it yourself? over a full season with Hill at these paces, he would have had 207 half-ppr fantasy points on the year, which would put him as the RB9. Didn't really consider that when putting him here, but that's just how it worked out. And that was during an incredibly down year for running backs. Obviously, it's difficult to just throw health into an equation to make a point, but if you have guys like Nick Chubb, Saquon, CMC, Eckler, Miles Sanders at full health, even if you get two of them back, he's sitting at RB11, RB12 for the year. He's a fringe, borderline RB1, very low end, high end RB2. And I don't think I could possibly justify taking him as the top 3 running back at this very moment, thinking that Taysom Hill is the quarterback. But Alvin is still Alvin, and I'm having him here because I know his track record, I know his production, I know how good he is, as well as the fact that the Saints have a killer line. I feel like it doesn't get enough credit. He had super sick blocking this year. They were one of the top graded offensive lines. But Brees not being there is a major issue that simply can't be overlooked. And as of right now, I just can't ignore it with these rankings. If Brees comes back, obviously things change. He moves all the way back up. But right now, given that Taysom Hill seems to be his quarterback, I think RB9 is honestly a little generous. Rounding out the top 10, but not the list, we have DeAndre Swift at my RB10. I'm aware that just going off of pure production from last year, we don't have a ton to go on. We actually have probably the least of anybody in this entire top 12, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, and I'm aware of that. But I'm putting him here because of the potential he has and the flashes we saw and just how much room he has to grow and develop as a workhorse in this league. For the first half of the year, in those first 10 weeks, he was caught in a 3-way committee with Kerryon Johnson and the ghost of Adrian Peterson. And he also had a weird brain injury he sustained in practice. I don't know what Matt Patricia's making him do in practice that you're giving your stud rookie running back you took in the second round a fucking brain injury at practice. Like, come on, Matt, that's why you got fired, amongst many other reasons. But either way, once they made him the starter, a decision that even Adrian Peterson saw coming a mile away. He felt it should have been made earlier. I agree with you, Adrian. But he took off. Swift really kicked up, wheels up in 30. He was the RB10 in half PPR. From weeks 10 to 16 in points per game. He did miss 3 weeks in that time. I believe that was also part of like a brain or knee injury. It was kind of weird with him that first season, I'm not going to lie. I know it's the off season and that coach speak is a real thing. Guys will just say shit to sound cool. Like Dan Campbell's biting kneecaps, being an alpha male. I respect the fuck out of it, but it is a bit of coach speak if we're keeping it 100. But when you look at Dan Campbell, and you look at Anthony Lynn, what they've said and their track record, it's what we have to go off of, and it's honestly very encouraging. Anthony Lynn is a guy who, for better or for worse, will shove the ball down the throat of whatever running back is in the backfield. Melvin Gordon, RB1 finish multiple times. Austin Eckler, RB1 finish multiple times. Kalen Ballage, fantasy relevant for 2 weeks. I can stop right here. If you can make Kalen Ballage fantasy relevant, you can make anybody fantasy relevant. You can make Frank Gore right now an RB2 if you tried hard enough with Anthony Lynn as your coach. So you see that, and then you're like, all right, that's an encouraging sign for DeAndre Swift, at least on the ground. We know Lynn likes those dual threat type of guys, running catch, you know, the vibes. But then you get to Dan Campbell's history and what he said. Assistant head coach for the Saints, really helped out with Alvin Kamara's development, him becoming the star he was. And he said that he wants to use Swift in a very similar role, especially when it comes to receiving out of the backfield and as a slot receiver matching up against linebackers. Coming out of college, we all knew Swift was a really nice receiver, real fluid, could run a decent route. But Patricia really didn't let him ride because he has the collective IQ of, like, dirt. I don't know, he's really fucking bad at his job. Shocked he kept it for so long. But there's that, and he is that elite receiver, but there are a few red flags. I won't ignore them. It's going to be a pretty poor team and a potential number 2 back getting time, like Kerryon Johnson, but I really have no faith in him doing anything other than letting DeAndre Swift get a cup of Blue Gatorade every few plays or so. The potential for Swift to pop the hell off is all the way there. Campbell wants to use him like Kamara. Lynn runs running backs into the ground. It's a match made in heaven, all 3 of them. Shitty offensive line, sure. Bad quarterback, sure. But they're going to feed the hell out of this man. And I'm going to bet on that volume, that usage, and that talent taking over to make him a top 10 back next year. Coming up at RB11, I think I'm going to swap 11 and 12 because it's my rankings. All right, so RB11 was 12, Aaron Jones. Out of respect, he's on this list. Also production. But the reason he's so low is because we don't know where the hell he's going to land. Green Bay looks like they should re-sign him, but they never really use him all the way, and they just drafted the human meatball in the second round of last year's draft, and he looked okay. He looked pretty fine. So I don't know why they would re-sign a running back to a pretty hefty contract or even franchise tag when he was $15 million, and you could either use that on a receiver or just let your second-round pick from last year ball out if you really want to. So I doubt he resigns with the Packers, and that's bad because not only do you lose an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, which is pretty good if you haven't gotten the memo, but it's a downgrade in terms of offensive line. Packers have one of the best offensive lines in the leagues. So pretty much anywhere he goes, it's going to be a downgrade from Green Bay. There are places that will use him like a workhorse. Miami's one that springs to mind. Kind of weak offensive line. But last year, whoever was alive in that backfield got fed 25 touches a game. If you give a guy with the talent of Aaron Jones compared to Salvin Ahmed and Kalen Ballage and Patrick Laird and every other fucking bum they had back there every week, he's going to blow them out of the water. He'll be much higher than 11. But there is that uncertainty with the landing spot. He has finished in the top 5 the past 2 years. That's why he's still in the top 12. He's just earned himself a spot here annually, even if he's never ranked appropriately. If he resigns, if he lands somewhere different, we will come back to these rankings whenever that happens and adjust accordingly. Closing off my top 12 with my former RB11 as of about 3 minutes ago, Cameron Akers out of Florida State, my RB12. Much like every single other 2020 running back, he took a while to break out, but in his instance, it was due to the three-headed monster of him, Malcolm Brown, and Darrell Henderson, and an injury that lingered for about the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. I think he played week 1 that was out for a while. However, once he was given the reins, once they let him rock, it was all him in the backfield. From weeks 12 to 16, where he was really the starter, he was the RB15, 13th in points per game. He really broke out in that New England game because we suck against the zone run, and it was really bad. The rushing over hit in the first quarter. Should have bet it. Knew it was going to hit. Didn't take it. I'm underage, but that's fine. But McVay has come out recently and said he is a true 3-down back, and that's all I needed to hear. Malcolm Brown, gone, sucks. Darrell Henderson, Gatorade guy. I'm going to let Cam Akers get a cup handed to him when he comes off the sidelines. Give him a wet towel if he's feeling up to it. And Akers managed to produce at a relatively high level with the 52nd ranked run blocking efficiency, and he faced the 5th highest number of players in the box in the entire league with 7.3. A lot of these issues will change with another year. The offensive line will get better, and with Matthew Stafford instead of Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford is a lot better than Jared Goff. If you think otherwise, you're just wrong. I'm not willing to have a debate on this fact. Stafford's going to open up the box, going to establish a passing threat that's not in structure play action, because that's all Jared Goff could run without getting confused. It's going to make life a whole lot easier for Akers, not having to face 8 linebackers and 3 down linemen every play. A workhorse in this McVay offense that is explosive as is Cam Akers with the dual threat ability. It's a common thread on this list. Guys with that dual threat ability are usually going to get pretty high up on the list, with a few exceptions, you know. The last Rams workhorse we saw, different types of players, I know, but Todd Gurley, and remember how that turned out. Hopefully it's not the heartbreak of him falling into the end zone 8 times in about 3 years in a different team that sucks because he can't run anymore. I'm hoping for that prime production where they feed him like 30 times a game through the air, on the ground. He works in an amazing offense with Sean McVay masterminding it. I'm in on him as my RB12, wrapping up the guys I think that are going to be RB1s for this coming season. Just to wrap up the rankings one more time, from top to bottom, we got Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, and then Cam Akers. A few guys that were real close. That influx of talent from last year really fucked up making these rankings. Guys like Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, all deserved, and you could argue could get that spot at 11 or 12, even higher, honestly. There's a lot of talent coming in, and it always seems like there's talent, but this year it seems like there's more than usual. Hell, even older guys like Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, who had rough years last year, could creep into that top 14 range. It's really tough. It's a hard list. It's definitely going to change a shit ton as the year progresses, as more things come out. James Robinson, too. Can't forget about him. Undrafted GOAT. Fucked me last year because I traded Leonard Fournette for him after week 1. Not going to talk about it. Made bad decisions. That's why I'm here. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed my rankings. If you disagree, roast the shit out of me in the comments politely. Leave your rankings. Let me know where I went wrong. Let me know why Alvin Kamara with Taysom Hill will be the best fantasy running back since LaDainian Tomlinson. And that's going to be it for tonight, guys. See ya.